In December 1971, doctors and journalists who want to assist populations in distress across the world come together and create Médecins Sans Frontières. For the past 50 years, the organisation has constantly strived to reinvent the concept of humanitarian medical aid, providing assistance to populations affected by conflict or forced to flee. (1979). Southeast Asia is in the grip of a violent conflict. Hundreds of thousands of Cambodian refugees fleeing the Khmer Rouge's totalitarian regime find shelter in camps in Thailand. For the first time, fledgling association Médecins Sans Frontières organises the delivery of medical aid to refugees.
Et en ce moment, je vois à peu près 1500 malades regroupés ici, dans des conditions assez déplorables.
Treating these refugees in Southeast Asia marks a turning point for the development of the NGO's logistical and medical capacities. Early 1979. Several thousands of Cambodians and Vietnamese flee from their countries every week. They cross the sea to escape communism and seek asylum in neighbouring countries. But when they arrive, they find their borders closed to them. The world discovers the boat people. With support from French intellectuals and members of the organisation, Bernard Kouchner, one of MSF's leaders, decides to charter a rescue vessel, Île de Lumière.
Les gens se noyaient en mer. Il fallait leur jeter une bouée. Il fallait donc un bateau.
But the initiative isn't received well by some members of the association, who consider it too personal and too media-oriented. Against this backdrop, opinions are divided. Whereas some want above all to draw attention to the refugees' plight, others want the organisation to become more structured and improve their situation by providing them more effective medical care. After much divisive debate, in 1979, Bernard Kouchner leaves Médecins Sans Frontières and creates Médecins du Monde. By the end of the 1970s, the height of the Cold War, MSF provides assistance in Central and Southeast Asia and Latin America, primarily to refugees fleeing communist bloc countries. These operations influence the positions taken by the organisation, which routinely condemns the impact of totalitarian regimes on their populations. (1984). After 2 years of drought, famine is declared in provinces in northern Ethiopia. Exacerbated by the war with Eritrea, but even more by the policy of forced collectivization of agriculture instituted by Colonel Mengistu's pro-Soviet regime, millions of people are affected.
Il est marasmique, il lui manque des protéines et des calories. Mais le problème, c'est une surinfection, une maladie quelconque sur un terrain fragile comme ça. C'est beaucoup plus difficile, évidemment, à soigner, quoi.
Due to an unprecedented media campaign and growing international concern, food aid pours in. Starving peasant farmers drawn to food distribution sites the authorities set up in the south of the country are loaded like cattle onto trucks, often requisitioned from aid organisations.
በርካታ ወገኖቻችን በዘላቂ የመልሶ ማቋቋምና የስፍራ ፕሮግራም አማካይነት በቅድሚያ ሙሉ ፈቃደኝነታቸው እንዲረጋገጥ የተደረገ በመሆኑ
MSF realises its presence in the distribution centres is being instrumentalised by the government and that deportations conducted in horrific conditions are causing the deaths of tens of thousands of Ethiopians.
On était utilisés comme une sorte d'appât qui attirait les populations, et une fois qu'elles étaient regroupées, on envoyait les camions qui en principe étaient destinés à transporter du grain. Ça s'appelait des transferts de population. En réalité, c'était une déportation massive. On était l'instrument d'un pouvoir totalitaire et on n'était plus du tout une aide humanitaire destinée à la population.
For publicity condemning this policy of deportation and misappropriation of international aid, MSF is expelled from the country, a first for the organisation. MSF discovers in Ethiopia that, unknown to those delivering it, aid can be used as an instrument of death and oppression. From Thailand to Congo-Brazzaville, Salvador to Guinea, the Balkans to Malawi, population displacements shape MSF's history. Whether still in their home countries or having sought refuge elsewhere, migrants are provided shelter in camps which are often gigantic.
En fait, on est arrivé avec l'équipe ici et il n'y avait absolument rien. Tout d'un coup, la voiture du ministère de l'Intérieur qui nous accompagnait nous a dit « Bon, ben, maintenant vous vous arrêtez, vous allez mettre le camp ».
Running camps, providing access to medical care and water, distributing kits. Sometimes MSF is the only organisation providing assistance. With each emergency, the organisation improves its logistical expertise.
Hier soir, 30 tonnes sont arrivées ici pour la première distribution. Distribution se faisant tous les 14 jours.
Responding to epidemics, conducting epidemiological surveillance and vaccination campaigns enable MSF to also enhance its medical expertise. Summer 1994. Immediately after the Rwandan Tutsi genocide, under the influence and often the threats of Hutu extremists responsible for the genocide, over 1 million people flee the country. As the army of the new regime in Kigali advances, they also fear more massacres. Crammed into overcrowded camps in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the refugees are subjected to the terror of the militiamen.
Au moment où il y avait les rapatriements, il n'était pas rare de voir les matins des cadavres de gens qui manifestement ont été lapidés, des trucs comme ça.
The extremists maintain their grip on the refugees. People in the camps are forcibly enrolled and aid intended for the refugees misappropriated. Their objective? Rebuild an army and go and polish off the genocide in Rwanda. How to manage the aid efforts without becoming an auxiliary to criminal elements still present in the camps.
Nous, ce qui nous importe, c'est que le plus grand nombre puisse avoir de la nourriture. Et il y a beaucoup de gens ici qui n'ont rien à voir avec ça, qui sont des innocents qui ont été emmenés, ramenés ici, qui ont fui. Et on ne peut pas ne pas leur donner de nourriture en disant finalement il y a des gens parmi vous qui ont participé et donc on ne va pas passer par eux et on va essayer de s'organiser autrement.
To continue to help the refugees, should the MSF teams close their eyes to aid being misappropriated for criminal purposes? Faced with this dilemma, MSF sections adopt different strategies. Several choose to condemn the situation and withdraw at the end of 1994. Others stay on for a few months, hoping to make themselves useful by documenting the violence and abuse. Finally, all the sections leave the camp at the end of 1995. These interventions create controversy, disagreements, and divisions within MSF, particularly regarding the attitude to adopt in camps called safe havens. How should MSF react when fighters use camps as rear bases? Camps are extremely vulnerable places. Too many people crowded into one place, families torn apart, insecurity. violence, including sexual, is not uncommon. To support victims of sexual violence, MSF provides medical treatment, mental health services, and social and legal support.
najua likambo hapo na nani mwana mokia voilà na makambo basani nga ezo sepelisa nga
ezo sepelisa te e pe ana boma likambo te
na boma.
In February 2002, a United Nations report documents the scale of the sexual abuse committed by peacekeepers and aid workers in West African refugee camps. It is to be one of the first alerts on the phenomenon before the years that follow reveal more incidents tarnishing the work of humanitarians. Deprivation and reliance on aid expose displaced people and refugees to abuse by those supposed to help them. In 2007, MSF assigns a team to preventing and addressing abuses to guard against this form of misconduct. Population displacements, whether they are the consequence of conflict, economic or climate crisis, are the reason for many of MSF's interventions. In summer 2017, after a further outbreak of violence and Myanmar's army ferocious repression, hundreds of thousands of Rohingyas flee to camps in Bangladesh that have been overpopulated for decades.
بعد military argor golle gay goller sadde tarare edur maya argortis side kide tarare edur ma bihede gorer mari bi bagunu mari bihede wale gudi danguli de wale ay anno say ton made gottini liye gor ma baguru yi ay argor faragi ge side ay dura ma dekhide manush mandira dekhiran gole kesse video la jarge diri marton fadiba guli mare jogara der tar baad maya fadiba zulum gorer tar jana gorer hen gorer am ma boy nan mar bazi an bayir huwan den bosor huwan bonur huwan den.
In the wake of the Arab Spring, the question of population displacements takes on a new dimension. For a long time, Europe had been able to keep the issue at arm's length, but geopolitical shifts and conflicts are now driving huge numbers of people to its borders. The gateway to Europe, Libya, becomes a living hell for migrants who get stuck there.
ستة شهور أنا في السجن. مسكوني أول شيء لما تدخل الجوة يمسكوك أربع نفرات رجاجيل يعني مسكوني وبعدين حطوني على الأرض وعلى الظهر ضربوني على الظهر يعني ظهري من هنا وكسروها والراسي يمسكوني راسي بيحطوني على الجدار على الدرب يعني.
With the complicity of the European Union, Libya, like Turkey, which serves as a buffer on the migratory route, becomes a snare for refugees and migrants journeying from North Africa to Europe. Thousands of people are held captive, robbed, tortured and murdered. MSF helps them. Some exiles cross the Mediterranean. Rickety boats often get into trouble, and MSF participates in operations to rescue them. Between 2015 and 2020, over 20,000 people die attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea. On board the rescue vessels, the migrants' nightmare still isn't over. In 2018, more and more countries start refusing to open their doors to survivors. Aid organisations coordinating with the maritime authorities step in to offset the shortcomings of European countries' sea search and rescue operations. However, they're accused of playing into the hands of people smugglers and even encouraging migration. NGOs become targets of smear campaigns, are threatened with prosecution, and their ships are immobilised or seized. With multiple obstacles put in its way, on several occasions MSF has to suspend its sea search and rescue operations.
What is at stake here is more than simply the absurd charges against MSF. Rather, it is the instrumentalization of fear. It's an attempt to demonize people, an already vulnerable group of people. Migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. They are people, and they are suffering as a direct result of Italian and other EU policies.
Migrants arriving in Europe are used as political bargaining chips. The 22 EU member states delegate the migrant management system and even their retention to frontline countries like Italy and Greece. The many migrants landing in Greece are parked and abandoned in camps where conditions are deplorable.
يقول له بدي اطلع اجيب دواء اجيب شيء يقول له ممنوع طيب شو دكتور قال ممنوع شو دكتور يعني هذا يعني حبس كلاب كنت اشتغل بحبس كلاب انا والله حبس كلاب ما شو الشغله هون.
After much internal debate, MSF condemns the signing of the agreements between the EU and the Turkish government, with the latter committing to not letting the exiles leave its territory. The organisation also announced it will no longer request EU funding.
MSF will no longer request funds from the European Union and its member states. The decision was taken to distance MSF from funding that is used to support a migration and asylum policy which have damaging consequences of people in need of assistance. This decision will take immediate effect and will apply to all our projects worldwide. Refugees and migrants entering Europe via Greece, Spain or Italy are treated shamefully.
This is my tent and this is our life. As you can see, there's a lot of garbage here and the rats playing around our tent and go inside and mess with our food.
In 2016, MSF decides to build a camp to give shelter to migrants.
Vous êtes ici sur le premier camp humanitaire construit par Médecins Sans Frontières en France. C'est un camp humanitaire, c'est un camp citoyen finalement, avec l'intervention de toutes les associations historiques locales, mais ce qui permet d'avoir un bon signe d'accueil pour toutes ces personnes.
Living in a camp remains the exception. Most refugees in Italy and France sleep rough.
جيدة في ليبيا يعني شوية شوية نخدم يعني قلت يعني أكلهم تاني جيدة ليبيا وفي ليبيا ناس الليبيين مسكوني سجنوني ودقوني أزول وما في شيء أكل ما في يعني قاعدين هنا في كبر النوم وصباحا نقوم متجاجين يعني حتى يعني واحد ماشي عريان ذاته ما عندي لبس ذاته.
The presence of migrants is a burning issue, often instrumentalized in political debates. Even worse, countries like France implement policies of harassment against migrants and people seeking to help them.
Nous avons été alertés sur des comportements de la police absolument inacceptables, qui retirent les couvertures des personnes qui dorment dehors, histoire de ne pas les voir dans la rue au petit matin.
Central America is also affected by massive population displacements. People fleeing violence and economic crisis try to migrate to the US that turns them back at the border.
Nunca en mi vida habíamos sufrido de esta forma, así como hemos sufrido aquí. Porque yo pensé que al entrar a Estados Unidos, como estaba la ley, que íbamos a quedarnos allá en Estados Unidos. No importara que me tuviera un albergue, pero por lo menos mi hija no estuviera aquí en las condiciones que estamos, pues.
Long-term camps like Dadaab in Kenya, the ones hosting Syrians in Jordan and Lebanon, and displaced people in the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Central African Republic are properties for MSF. The organisation's volunteers meet people without any vision of the future.
بس هيك مجرد بني آدم مثل البطارية، حدا مشغل بطارية وماشي بس، ولا أنا ما في لا إحساس ولا مشاعر ولا شيء، تعبانة على الآخر تعبانة. ما عم بقدر أوصف لك شو يعني ما، لأني أنا تعبان نفسيا، ما عم بقدر أعرف شو بدي، تعبان نفسيا نهائيا تعبانة.
The 1970s and 80s and the positive image of the boat people are a distant memory. Today's refugees, stuck in overcrowded camps in Africa or journeying to Europe, at best arouse feelings of indifference and at worst, hostility. The foundations of international treaties drafted at a time when migration did not reach the shores of developed countries don't stand up to the test of proximity. While migration has always existed, public opinion increasingly perceives it in a negative light, and even more so since 2015, when migration policies became tougher to the point of criminalising support to refugees. How to take action in these conditions? Constantly enhancing its scope of action, MSF now provides protection, help with accommodation, mental health services and social support. But how can we make ourselves more useful to migrants and refugees? What can we hope to achieve by speaking out and mobilising our resources?